Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you so much for joining the Survivors Trust webinar on the Child Protection Authority. My name's Lucy Duckworth and I'm the Policy Advisor here at the Survivors Trust. And some of you may know that the Survivors Trust has been the host of a campaign group called IICSA. We have been working for a couple of years now to campaign for a Child Protection Authority and to make sure that all the recommendations from the independent inquiry into childhood sexual abuse are fully implemented. Before we talk about the CPA, I'm just going to introduce our panel today. So Alexis, if I could please go to you.
Thank you. Good afternoon, everyone. I'm Alexis Day, and I'm the former chair of the Public Inquiry and a member of the Act on IICSA campaign group.
Thank you. David?
My name is David Greenwood. I'm a solicitor.
Thank you. And John?
Hi, everybody. I'm John O'Brien. I was secretary to the former IICSA and also a member of the Act on IICSA campaign group.
Brilliant. Thank you. Faye?
Hi there, everyone. I'm Faye Maxted. I'm the Chief Exec of Survivors Trust. I was also on the Victims and Survivors Consultative Panel for the Independent Inquiry.
Thank you. And we're delighted to be joined by the Department for Education as well. Alia, would you like to introduce yourself?
Yeah, thanks, Lucy. Good afternoon, everyone. I'm Alia Mortasavi and I work at the Department for Education in the Tackling Child Sexual Abuse team and have been working on the design and implementation of the Child Protection Authority.
Thank you. And Cheryl?
Hi, everybody. I'm Cheryl Mendes. I head the safeguarding unit, which Alia and others work in. And our team has been developing the policy on the Child Protection Authority. I should also say that in 2015, I worked with John to set up IICSA and had the privilege of leading the victim and survivor engagement team to set up the Truth Project. So this is full circle for me. Yeah, very, very pleased to be here. Thanks, Lucy.
Thanks, everyone. You might all know as well that there is a consultation out for the Child Protection Authority, and we will hear a little bit more about what that entails and why it's so important. You will know that the independent inquiry into child sexual abuse ran for 8 years. It cost 180 million. It heard from 7,500 survivors of sexual violence, and it led to 20 key recommendations. At the time of this recording, which is on the 11th of February 26, I think we only have 3 fully in place. The CPA was one of the key ones that we were really getting behind. Many of you will know that at the moment it's very clear our structures in society are not set up to either prevent or respond to child sexual abuse. With 500,000 children being sexually abused every single year, that's 1 a minute. That will be 60 who experience sexual abuse during the time of this call. We obviously aren't working right and our systems aren't set up in the right way to deal with this problem. Much of that is because it gets lost between different government departments, and we haven't had an overhaul in our child protection legislation since the Children's Act of 1989. The CPA is designed to bridge that gap and to inspect regulatory bodies that will be looking out for children and that have children in their care, and to look after all aspects of their protection. And so we will look at what the plan is for that as we go. To start with, though, I'd just like to go to Faye Maxted, CEO of the Survivors Trust, who's going to tell us a little bit about how much we've learned from this, particularly from our members and the survivors we speak to. Faye.
Thanks, Lucy. So for anyone who isn't aware of Survivors Trust, our membership is over 120 specialist voluntary sector rape and sexual abuse support services in the UK and Ireland. And they provide specialist counselling, advocacy, and various other support for victims and survivors. The major client group for these services is adult survivors, women and men, survivors of child sexual abuse or exploitation, and in ever-increasing numbers, desperate for help and support. Since IICSA published its final report and recommendations, we've had so many contacts from survivors and practitioners and our member agencies asking what's happening with the CPA. I've worked with survivors who've talked about disclosing again and again and being ignored, asking why no one did anything. Any of our member agencies will tell you survivors who disclose to an adult, teacher, doctor or nurse, only to be ignored, and in many cases for the sexual abuse to continue, sometimes for years. There has been no joined-up approach to child protection or to accountability. And the main question that survivors come with is, why did no one do anything? Why did no one notice what was happening? So time and again, recommendations have been made only to fall by the wayside because there is no overarching authority to keep track or to monitor implementation. I can't emphasize enough how important the CPA is to survivors' trust, to our member agencies and to the survivors we work with. And just as an aside, one survivor that I worked with, a guy who'd been sexually abused at school, said, you know, schools have a legal duty to make sure that hazardous materials are safely locked away. Not so for the hazards that lurk in the staff room or at the school gate or at home. It's high time we had something in place which will bring that level of accountability and consistency across the board. Thanks, Lucy.
Thank you, Faye. Thank you. And I think, you know, that those of you on watching this who work directly with survivors or are survivors themselves will have many other stories and examples, as Faye has said, of this. So its importance can't be underestimated. IICSA found that the CPA was intended to address these systemic weaknesses by providing national leadership, consistent standards and a unified approach to learning and improvement across the child protection system. I'm going to go to you, Alexis, if I may, to just tell us a little bit about how you and your team reached this conclusion and the process there.
Thank you, Lucy. The way in which we reached this conclusion reflected much of what Faye has already said, but principally that the statutory agencies responsible for safeguarding, there's far too little emphasis on the extremely complex work of child protection, as opposed to the wider issues of safeguarding. And I know this personally from having attended many multi-agency committee arrangements over the years in their different forms. To be brief about it, there was far too much fragmentation and not enough single focus on child protection, nor was it clearly visible at local level and indeed to some extent at national level. In the leadership on this issue it somehow or other was becoming diluted and fragmented and not given the hugely important profile that was necessary to properly protect children.
Thank you, Alexis. I'm wondering as well, if I may ask you, how you think the process so far of establishing it has been, and how that's reflected the recommendation that you made.
Well, I think others could join in with their own views on this, but I will say that John O'Brien and myself were involved from an early stage in how this might develop and how it would look. And that can't be said for all of the recommendations that the public inquiry made. So that was a positive in all of this. It doesn't fully cover in detail everything that we recommended, but it is evolving, and we are pleased that at least we have got to this stage, but there is much work still to be done on it in order that it properly reflects what we recommended.
Brilliant, thank you. I will move on to the consultation and the scope very shortly, but John, would you be able to just tell us a little bit about the scope and what the government process is before we go to Cheryl and Alia to talk a bit more about the consultation, if that's okay?
Yeah, thanks, Lucy. I'll come back to scope if I may, because I know time is of the essence here. So I just wanted to briefly outline the process, as boring as that is, that would take us to a fully functioning, independent child protection agency from this point forward. So we're now in what I'd call stage 2/3 of the early stages, which is a government consultation on all sorts of aspects to do with the CPA, and I'll touch on a couple of those in a moment. For something that's significant, that is absolutely bog standard government approach, that they go out and they talk to a wide range of organisations to make sure they gather a broad range of views that help to shape the final implementation of whatever it is that they are planning to introduce. So there is nothing unusual about a consultation. Indeed, I'd have thought it was odd if there hadn't been a consultation on something this significant. So we're in that process now. And as Alexis has alluded to, a great deal of what's in that consultation reflects what Alexis said in her report. Some of it perhaps doesn't, in that it asks questions that are designed to help the government pitch where they put their tent. So, for example, on the powers of the CPA, there is a genuine debate obviously going on in DfE for wider input on where they do land on that. So that's why it's really important that as many people as possible answer this consultation, because it will feed into the advice that Cheryl and her team put to ministers. So once the consultation closes in early March, there will be a period where the DfE go through all of the answers to all of the questions, bring out the broad themes that are running through that, and use that to help inform and instruct the further advice they give to ministers. So that's the purpose of the consultation. Assuming all of that goes well and that ministers say, yes, we like what you've given to us, we fully understand that reflects what's come through the consultation. The next stage is that there will need to be a bill put in place. I'm sure there'll be some internal processes before that, but from a public perception, there will need to be a bill put in place to bring the CPA into existence. This requires the creating of a brand new organisation, which means the government will need to legislate to give them the necessary legal basis to put that in place, and that will require a bill. Cheryl may want to correct me here, but my understanding is that unusually, or at least not commonly, since 2024, when this government was elected, we're still in the first session. We've effectively had one session in 2 years rather than 2 sessions in 2 years, which means that the next available place to put a bill is the third session. I understand that the third session will commence at some time in 2026, but as I speak, we are still in the throes of the second session. There is definitely not enough time left in the second session to put in place a bill that hasn't yet been drafted, so it will have to go into the third session. The importance of saying all that is this government was elected in 2024, which means the very latest they can go to the country again is 2029. If we put in a bill into the third session, that session will not end until mid-2027 at the very earliest. And so if we are going to get a bill with all that involves, the drafting of the bill, the pulling of the bill through the parliamentary process, I won't bore everybody with that happens, but you've seen that happen in Parliament. It needs to go to the Commons, then it needs to go to the Lords. There will be amendments tabled in the Commons, there will be amendments tabled in the Lords. It will bounce backwards and forwards. That will all take a significant amount of time. So if we are really serious about having a CPA in place before the next election, the third session, in my view, is the latest that such a bill could be introduced to ensure that it receives royal assent before the government needs to go to the country. Now, given where we are, the realistic timetable I expect means you will have a passed bill by the time of the next election. But I suspect, and Cheryl may surprise me on this, but I suspect there will be insufficient time left after the bill is passed for the CPA itself to be fully established and up and working. But the importance of getting a bill in place is that if there is a bill that is in train but hasn't completed its way through Parliament by the time the government calls an election, it falls. In other words, the next government needs to start from scratch. If it's passed and the next government decides it doesn't want to do it, it has to unpick that bill with another bill. So it just makes it in a far stronger position if there is a passed bill by the end of this parliamentary session. But I
Right.
just wanted to be honest with people that that's probably where we are on the timetable now, in that the best we will have is a passed bill.
I suppose it's a bit like with mandatory reporting. One said it's not quite good enough, but at least once it's in place, we can then work to change it.
Yeah,
And
I
if we
can't.
don't get this through in the third session, there is a risk it was full. That's what you're saying. So for those of you who are still to fill in your consultation, please do make sure that you mention that we really do want this through in the third session. We want this bill through.
Sorry, Lucy, I can't emphasize enough. No bill is ever perfect when it goes through. So please do not keep pushing for perfection, because the perverse outcome of that is that you won't get the bill through. So, I play the 80-20 rule. If it's 80% of the way there, let it go through and argue for future amendments once the bill's passed. But if people keep writing in asking for perfection, as desirable as that would be, it will not get through. So we need to have a strong, firm, but pragmatic approach, in my view, to agreeing legislation that goes 80% of the way there, and be happy to continuing to engage with government to get further changes further down the line if that's what.
Absolutely. And we've had a lot of questions as well, like how will it work? What if it's not good enough? It might not be, but we don't know how it will work yet. But we know with those statistics that I said earlier, a child sexually abused every single minute. What we're doing now definitely isn't working. So we've got to do something. We're getting a lot of questions coming through as well about how this differs to what IICSA recommended, and how the scope and the consultation differs. I will go to you, Cheryl, if I may, to answer some of those questions and say a little bit about the process. Thank you.
Sure. So, Lucy, did you want? I thought I might just give a bit of a context,
Yes, please do.
and answer some of those questions that I know are on your minds for sure.
Thank
So,
you.
thanks again for inviting us. I just want to start by saying, in terms of the CPA, that's probably going to be one of my professional highlights. Can I just say, my commitment to this is not just professional, it's absolutely personal. I was on this journey with John, Alexis, and others on the call. And so it's a real privilege to be sat here, leading this consultation and the policy development. So that's just my personal commitment to all of you. I've heard when I was at IICSA itself, and of course through various conversations since, the thing that keeps coming up, the word that stands out for me, or two words: failings and accountability. The consultation is out there and open till the 5th of March. It's open to anyone to give your views as an individual, as organizations. That's what we want to hear. So please, if you haven't looked already, you have till the 5th of March to do that. It has 3 areas, and I want to start by saying we want the CPA to add value. We don't want this to be another something which just clutters up the landscape and doesn't do very much of value. And the principles we used when setting this up and talking to John and Alexis and others is, not duplicating what's already out there, but also recognizing that there are quite significant reforms to children's social care which are coming through the Children's Wellbeing and Schools Bill at the moment. So if you haven't heard about that, there are some fundamental shifts to information sharing to better protect children, and that will include for the first time a single unique identifier. So we know children move around, we know that's difficult. There are some other things in there, including multi-agency child protection teams and multi-agency safeguarding arrangements. So what that means that MACPTs will change things at an operational frontline level. MASAs, which is the safeguarding arrangements, will look to do things differently and better at a strategic regional level. And where the CPA sits is above those, at a national oversight level, looking at what is happening across the system. So the first function will be about national oversight, which will include horizon scanning. And that came through, what are the emerging threats? What should we be worried about now. That hasn't quite hit, but will hit soon. The second is around sharing good practice. Now, we know there's the existing national panel which does that, but actually where can be a one-stop shop, which is the authority with a capital A, which people can go to and say, this is what the CPA is saying on this. This is what I can trust. And the third, which is probably the most important to all of you, is how do we create accountability, where, as we will all know, there are recommendations upon recommendations, quite often the very same recommendations. We've been saying the same thing for decades. The CPA will have a core function to track those at a national level and hold areas and agencies, organisations to account where they haven't followed through. And I think that's really important, because for me, that's the bit that's missing in the current system. So just to point you to the right bit, I'm sure you'll all read the consultation word by word, but the bit around how it will deal with serious and consistent failings, that's on page 44. I don't know, Lucy, if you're able to put a link to the consultation or send that out afterwards. But that talks about some of the powers we're hoping for the CPA to have. In terms of addressing the question about why doesn't it meet the IICSA recommendation, I think it's looking to do what IICSA wanted. The bit that's different is around inspection powers, and going back to what I was saying earlier, we're looking to not duplicate things that are already in the system. But let me be clear, if there's a part of the system which is not working in the way it should, then one, we should fix that. And if it's not, that's where the CPA will say, hey guys, inspectorates, this bit is not working. So it's holding those to account in the system for things they should be doing. And if they're not, that's where the CPA will step in. So we're not trying to create another layer of bureaucracy, because that won't help anyone, I don't think. But that's where we're trying to hold the system. We're looking at systemic changes. What are we doing to hold the system to account on child protection? Lucy, I'm just checking other questions that I've just... Did I cover the things that people were...
Oh, sorry, I was on mute there.
That's
We
okay.
get a lot of questions on the inspection powers and its power to inspect, and I just wondered if well, if anyone wanted to take that, because I think, I mean, maybe if I could go to you, Alexis, about how you envisage the inspection working. You know, I mean, this alongside something, a really robust, effective mandatory reporting and regulated activities could really transform child protection as we know it today. So maybe if I could go to you, Alexis, and then David, to talk a little bit about that would be great.
Okay, there were two areas that we specifically emphasised in our final report about the CPA and inspection. One was that if there are clearly gaps in the protection of children across the piece, and we believe there are, especially in unregulated education, that those should be areas that the CPA should pursue to ensure that children are properly protected, and that would strongly assert the need for an inspection regime to be in place, or indeed have the powers to inspect themselves in areas that are at present unregulated in any way. And as I say, there are particularly areas that we identified in the course of the public inquiry. But the other important area is where the inspection body has manifestly failed to identify through its own processes the major weaknesses that cause the protection of children to be incomplete, or indeed has allowed children to have fallen through the cracks, partly indeed because the inspection body hasn't done its job properly in scrutinising and identifying where these weaknesses exist, or indeed in following it up to the extent of ensuring that these gaps are closed. And we do know from the experiences of the last few years in some areas, and certainly in some high profile instances that has occurred, that the inspection body concerned hasn't failed to identify where weaknesses have existed, and has given a level of assurance that is false.
Yeah, when we're looking at inspections, and of course that leads into report as well. We've had a question come through about, is the emphasis still on children to report abuse rather than preventative measures? Faye, we hear a lot about the additional trauma, and so many times people saying that the disclosure and reporting process, even as adults, was as bad, if not worse, than the abuse itself, which is a horrific thing to know. I just wonder what your thoughts are on how the CPA can take away that responsibility and that pressure from children, and why it's so important.
I think the role of the CPA in relation to this is going to be in standardising training and enforcing training, making sure that everyone is really aware of the signs to look out for, and to be aware of how to respond to a child who is struggling, a child who they can see is demonstrating signs that they're experiencing abuse of some kind at home. And most teachers you speak to are very well aware of which children in their class are having problems and struggling. And so what they need is support and training and supervision and the confidence to know what to do. And we haven't had that. We haven't had that across the board. And we haven't got any overarching authority to put that in place. So I see the role of the CPA as standardising this and making sure that all of the various institutions that are involved are well equipped, well trained, well supported to be able to respond, so that that burden is not placed on the child.
Yeah,
if a child does want to disclose, then obviously, the professional, the practitioner needs to know absolutely what to do. They shouldn't be waiting for a child that's clearly suffering to come forward and speak.
And it's not specifically there about, the support the CPA ultimately could have in providing training and being a support rather than another body that's there just to hold people to account. We want it to be something that's supportive and something that's helpful, that it will, it can provide training. We don't know all these things yet. I guess that's why the consultation is so important. Like, if you want to see it do more, put it in the consultation. Lots of people have also said it's not quite what I expected, therefore I'm frustrated with it. Put it in the consultation, right? Because that's what we need to hear. And it's only once the consultation is complete and they have that, so many people asking for the same thing, that we can then add it. Cheryl, can I go back to you a little bit more on the consultation and the for those of us that aren't in civil service, I'm going to be very frank here, it's very long. It's
yes.
Lots of people have said, I started it, I stopped it. You don't need to answer every question. You can answer the questions that are relevant for you.
Absolutely.
And at the end of this call, we have provided a summary document of what we at TST would suggest, so we will be posting that as well. But just, I think people might be put off by some of the questions are quite technical. They might be for specific sectors. If they don't answer it, does it still go through? What do you do? I mean, we've got, do you just take home all this paper and then just read it? What happens next? Tell us.
So we have already had over 100 responses, but we know people will probably respond closer to the time, as it were, particularly the bigger organisations who are collating their thoughts. So we will be looking at all those consultation responses. and trying to pull out themes, if you like. And if we can do that by the sector of people. So this is what victims and survivors are telling us, or this is what social workers are saying, or that doesn't quite fit with what police are telling us. How do we match this? So it's a big exercise, and we will have to see what comes out of the consultation in terms of volume, but we will be looking to respond to that, I reckon, in the summertime. So it's just to, if I can take a pause and just say this is really important. The consultation isn't about if a CPA is going to happen. Okay, so sometimes government consultations are consulting on the premise of should we do this or shouldn't we? I just want to be really clear that there will be a CPA. The consultation is about what powers and functions it will have. And I know there will be a lot of questions about the details and the how are you going to do this, Cheryl and Alia? How is this going to work in practice? When you say compel evidence, what does that mean? What does that look like? That is the next chunk or tranche of work. What we needed to put in the consultation was what powers or functions are we looking at in terms of the big buckets of things, if I can put it like that, because we need to know that for what John was saying earlier in terms of legislation. Even to create a body called the Child Protection Authority, we need legislation. So that's why it's at the moment, it's almost like what's the vision for this body? What can it do? And then the next thing is, once we get all that back, is understand what people have said would work, what wouldn't work, why might it not work, and then take that away to understand then the next steps on how. And even though that consultation will be closed, let me just be clear that the consultation on policy development will be still open, in the sense of we will be having conversations with yourselves, with others, to inform how we take the next step towards the Child Protection Authority. Okay, so
Amazing.
as I said, the CPA will happen. We are looking at, it's subject to legislative timescales, a third session bill, as John said. And the important thing is that even the CPA won't be switched on like that overnight. Oh, the bill's passed. Oh, here it is. It will be commenced at some point in the future. But what we'll be doing is working out, what does that transition look like? What are the things we can do that we don't need legislation for? Maybe as a shadow CPA until it's formalized, if you like. So I want to say that, but I want to come back to your point on prevention, and I just wanted to make clear that I see the CPA very much being about prevention as well as what happens afterwards. So prevention there's three things in my mind that you need for any type of harm or crime to happen, and that's an offender, a victim, and some kind of location, whether that's online or real. Okay, and I feel that prevention needs to focus on all of those. So maybe in terms of situational prevention, something as simple as lighting in a school place which is not lit up. I don't know. But there are things that can be done, and I think it's for the CPA looking to others and pointing to best practice in this. That, I say, whether it's teachers, social workers, police, parents, children can go and say, what is it I need to know about this thing? And that very important point about out of school settings. I know when I was at IICSA, so many things were coming out in that space, weren't they? We don't need to recount those. Okay. And
I guess the thing about prevention, though, is we're not ever going to prevent it until we're properly funding it, and we're not going to fund it until we fully understand the scale of what we're dealing with and the prevalence. And we're not going to do that until we keep the data, and then we keep going around in a circle. I find it really quite frustrating. I can see some of the questions that have come in as well, that actually aren't necessarily about the CPA. They might be about some of the other recommendations, such as mandatory reporting or the public awareness campaign. And I think it is a real, diplomatically speaking, a real disappointment that the last two governments have consistently rejected the idea of a full national public awareness campaign, which IICSA did recommend, because so many times we speak to even people working with children and they do not understand the scale of this. And until people really understand that this is every single day you are meeting somebody who is experiencing abuse or who has experienced abuse, and therefore we are meeting perpetrators every day, until we really take that on board, we're not going to get behind any proper prevention measures. So I think we really do need that public awareness campaign. And so I mean, my ask, as always, is on top of the CPA, please make sure that you do fill out the consultation and make sure your voice is heard, but also keep the pressure on the government to make sure that this and many of the other reforms we know, we don't need any more questions or reviews into why we've got this so wrong. We know we've got it wrong, and we've already got a blueprint for change, and now we need to get on and do it. And that's not just on the CPA. John.
Lucy, can I just come back to a couple of things on the CPA though? And I want to talk about powers again, because I know there is a real dichotomy for the government in this in terms of not replicating what's already there. But I just wanted to pick up on a couple of things Alexis said. Alexis used the word unregulated sectors, and there are still, at this point in the 21st century, places that are not the children's home, where they are essentially put into the care of strangers, that are not regulated. And it is really important that there are no areas for which the CPA is not regulated, where it covers the safety and well-being of children. One of the things we've got to remove with the CPA is to make sure it genuinely has that full national remit, because that will be the first time that one body has been able to poke its stick into any area where children are looked after, cared for, whatever you want to call it, and be able with authority to look at what's good and what's bad in that areas. And I'm actually a big advocate for not setting up a new inspectorate within the CPA just for the sake of it. But Alexis also touched on the failures of current inspectorates, and we could all pull out report after report that have talked about the failures of whichever inspectorate is, CQC, whatever it is. I do think it's important that ultimately the CPA must have the power, even if it can't have an inspector of its own, to order a re-inspection against criteria that the CPA sets in areas where it feels that the failure is of the inspectorate that covers that particular area. And I just wanted to pick up on something Cheryl said about the three circumstances where you need a perpetrator, and where you have a perpetrator, you need to have a stick to deter them from perpetrating. So the CPA needs to be able to do a bit more than just write to the minister to say, we think this inspector or this organisation isn't doing stuff properly. Now, others that have heard me talk about this will know that I compare the CPA to the Health and Safety Inspectorate. We do want it to be an education-first organisation. But for me, the most effective thing about the HSE is when it's done its best and an organisation simply isn't doing its best, it shows its teeth, and it does have real teeth. So we must be able to replicate that in the CPA. And that doesn't mean setting up an agency that takes inspection powers away from everybody else, but it must be able to question the effectiveness of inspections that have been taking place elsewhere. And then the final thing I wanted to say is one of the questions in the consultation asks you what sort of organisation the CPA should be. And by that, I'm getting technical. Should it be an agency? Should it be a non-departmental public body? It's really important that you answer that question, because all of those things have different degrees of independence attached to them. And so you should, if you don't know what any of those mean, I would suggest not re-educating yourself. Just say it needs to be very independent, and it needs to be able to report in a way that the government has to take notice, which for me would suggest it issues its reports to Parliament. Because having sat in an organisation, the Home Office, that receives reports from various inspectors, where they report to a minister, it is not unheard of for those reports to be sat on for a year or two. So I do think it's one where when it publishes reports, they need to be available via the parliamentary route rather than by the ministerial route.
Yeah, I agree, John. Thank you. And I think, David, sorry, we're still having sound issues with you, which is very annoying. So we did check. I think the team are trying to get hold of you, but David has said it's just the importance that it can initiate its own inspections where regulators are failing. And I guess, we've always talked about everyone knows what Ofsted can do in an education setting. Everyone knows what the health and safety executive can do. This absolutely would be the same. I think as well, a lot of questions and confusion. A lot of people are saying, well, hang on, what if it doesn't do this? And what if, so you're saying that current systems should carry on? There's nobody's saying that if we get the CPA, we can all abandon all other efforts at supporting children, supporting adult survivors and prevention methods. We're just saying that it is one of the key ways that we can begin the complete overhaul and reform of our systems, which is needed, which will sadly take generations to do. But this is alongside everything else. Do not give up on still making sure that other things are in place. We still need to make sure that the public are more aware of this. We still need to make sure that reporting processes are enhanced and much better. And above everything else, I think we must make sure that the police and those working in education receive more support and training. And so often they're the ones that are the first to see children who are at risk, and they don't have that support and training. And that's something that absolutely must change. And not all of this can fall under the CPA, I think. We're getting a lot of questions, and as usual, we're not going to have time to get through them all. Alia, do you want to answer the question? Lots of people as well are talking about non-state settings and where it goes, and this is something that has often come up with mandatory reporting. So it's going to be anyone who works with children. What are we saying here?
Yeah, so we're clear that the CPA's work, output and focus will be on children who are experiencing or likely to experience significant harm or abuse wherever this occurs. And more broadly, we've been working closely with key stakeholders, including parents, on proposals for further enhancing safety of these settings. Additionally, last year, the department launched a call for evidence on safeguarding in out-of-school settings, and that sought to better understand current sector safeguarding practices and invited views on approaches for further strengthening safeguarding. And this call for evidence closed in September last year, and we're currently in the process of analysing the responses with support from independent external analysts, given the significance of this issue. And we intend to undertake further engagement, including focus groups with parents and smaller providers and sector roundtables with safeguarding experts and sector representatives, and we'll be issuing a full response in due course.
Report the interim period, while we're waiting for it to be able to be set up and exercise its full powers, and how there's a lot of talk in the document as well about the panel, and sort of what that means and what this interim period is going to look like and how it can already start to make a difference.
Okay. So I think this is where, when we talk about the full IICSA report, because the CPA is one of the important aspects of the IICSA report, but there were many that was important. Mandatory reporting is another thing. Now, Cheryl talked earlier about a commencement order. I don't want to get all technical, but when a bill gets passed, if organisations or individuals need time to prepare themselves for the consequences of that bill, it has what is called a commencement order attached to it. And all that means is the full impact of the bill is delayed. So it's passed, it's got royal assent, it's definitely legal, but it's delayed to give people time to prepare for it. That will definitely be the case with the CPA, and I'd be very surprised if it doesn't have a commencement order of at least a year on it to allow organisations and individuals to prepare. And the same will be true of mandatory reporting, but mandatory reporting is due to get royal assent soon. So we can start to prepare the ground and improve things for the CPA by introducing mandatory reporting, which will increase the amount of reporting that's done, and that will increase the awareness and the information that exists in the system about the sorts of places children are abused, what sort of abuse is taking place today, where is it taking place, what do the perpetrators look like. So it will start to produce information. We've just also, on the 26th of January, might seem like a small thing, but for the first time, if you're a parent and you want to employ a tutor in your home, you can now facilitate getting access to an enhanced disclosure and a barred list check. So there are already things happening that are going to start to prepare the ground to close some of those gaps that we've all talked about today. The important thing about all of this is, and this is no comment at all on Cheryl and her colleagues today, but I've been as guilty as anybody of this in the past. These things tend to get taken forward independently by the departments that oversee them, and there isn't a great deal of joined upness in the way that the different parts interact. And the whole point of Alexis's bill was there needs to be much more awareness and much more joined upness in how those things interact. So we should all, as individuals with a interest in this sector, we should keep an eye on mandatory reporting. We should keep an eye on the changes to the DBS scheme. We should keep an eye on all of those recommendations that are about to be implemented or have been implemented, and make sure for the first time that we do see the output, that we do understand the output, and we understand what the relevant organisations are doing with that output to improve current process, so that when the CPA does come into being, it takes over, if nothing else, a much more data-rich environment. Now, some people might say, what's he talking about, data? But it doesn't matter where you look in the child protection world, where you see failings, you see huge gaps in data. So if I just moved on for grooming gangs for a moment, we know from IICSA that a number of police forces, they reported abuse of a child but didn't take it any further than that. So you didn't know whether it was mental, physical, or sexual. And in many instances, they didn't include the ethnicity, or in some cases the gender of the child, or the ethnicity or the gender of the perpetrator. These are all things that don't need legislation. We should just be putting pressure on the Home Office to encourage police forces very strongly to start doing those things now. We shouldn't wait for the end of the proposed grooming gangs inquiry, for example. So there's all these things that have definitely come about because of pressure from IICSA and others. And we really need to make sure now that they're joined up so that the ground is properly prepared for the CPA to come in and fully join up those systems. That might sound like a grand scheme, but I think those are the things we should all be doing to make sure that the ground is properly prepared. And you should be writing to MPs every time something that you expect to happen doesn't happen.
Absolutely don't underestimate the power of writing to your MPs. They have to respond. So even if you feel it's a fruitless task, do please keep doing it. Cheryl, and Ali, I wanted to hear a little bit more from you about the interim period as well, but we finally have David back. We found out what the problem was. So thanks, David. I know you wanted to talk a little bit about the unregulated areas such as churches and military, which are currently excluded from many protection bills and Ofsted inspections and all the rest of it. Do you want to tell us a bit about that?
Yes, I hope you can hear me now.
We can, thank you.
Great. So Alexis herself carried out a really detailed piece of work on what was happening in the churches. And we know from IICSA that churches are unregulated. We know that it's much, much deeper than even Alexis was able to touch on in her quite extensive report that she did a couple of years ago on independence in safeguarding. Now, these are places that are beyond the reach of current regulators. House churches, that type of thing, also beyond the reach of current regulators, possibly childminders, and in actually the military are unregulated. Regulators are not allowed to go in there. We need to find a way, find a handle on getting those brought into the remit of this CPA, so that we can make sure that they also adhere to good standards of safeguarding. I'd also like to say that I echo what Cheryl was saying earlier, that this is not going to be a big bang. This is going to be implementing a new regulator and introducing all these different areas of life, of public and private life in some cases, to the idea that they are going to be regulated by a new regulator, like the Health and Safety Executive. I like that idea. So that it will be a slow burn. They will get to know the regulator. They'll be given guidance and help by this regulator, and encouragement. And it will be a slow thing whilst different pieces of the proposed legislation are turned on. And in 5, 6, 7 years' time, it might be almost fully formed. I'm sure it will develop over the years. One other thing that I'd like to mention is that when I was responding to the consultation, I found myself suggesting that data analysis is done. I heard John just speaking about data, and I found that the answer to lots of the questions was that more data is required, and data analysts need to dig into the current data that we have and work out ways of capturing new data in ways that can be used across the piece. So that's all I need to say. Thank you.
Thank you. Thanks, David. We're getting a lot of questions around mandatory reporting as well. And we know again, everything Faye was saying earlier about how many questions we've had on the CPA, we've had probably a few more even on mandatory reporting. And I think it's another reminder for us to set up that mandatory reporting webinar. So I am not going to address those individually. That's not because we're not interested at all. It's just because this is on the CPA, and we will certainly get round to answering those. Alia and Cheryl, while we have you, I'm very grateful, but it wouldn't be right if we didn't actually make those comments, I'm afraid, about the consultation. And people have said it, someone, you can see in the chat as well, some people have said, it's a bit elitist, and how are members of the public going to answer. I know I've spoken with you as well before about if you need a certain number of answers. I think it's just really reassuring to reiterate that there will be a CPA, and that feels really exciting to be able to say that you said that. I'd like to know a little bit more about ministerial input as well, and the question that is on everybody's minds is about funding as well, because we, across the board, all frontline services are in a complete crisis for funding, as you know. So what's that going to look like? And if I could ask you to answer that briefly, then I'll come to each of you panelists to just say a few words before we close. Thank you.
You mentioned the F word, didn't you, Lucy?
I did, sorry. I couldn't have you online and not.
No, of course. I mean, it's a perennial problem, and I don't have to tell you all how difficult things are at the moment. So I can't say anything in that space, over and above what the government is doing in terms of frontline, in terms of family help. There's £2.4 billion. That's, to go to local authorities to strengthen early interventions. And that means to help children and families early on so that things don't escalate, if that makes sense. Yeah. So that, understanding that the child has complex needs. It's never, is it, just neglect or abuse, or no. So that's the vision, if you like, and the funding behind that, which is one of our flagship programs. What else were you asking me?
Ministerial
about ministerial input.
Yeah.
So our ministers are completely committed to this, and I should say that we have a Keeping Children Safe ministerial board. So understanding, John, what you said, it can't just be the DfE. We're holding the policy at the moment, but you need Home Office for policing, you need health, obviously, and we've got the social work and MOJ, in fact, when we're talking about young offenders, things like that. So we are engaging with other ministers through that board, and we will engage them as we continue to make sure that they're doing their bit as well as us doing our bit.
And everyone is going to want to know how they communicate and how they input into those conversations, and maybe that's something we can share afterwards. These aren't that's not a public board of any kind, is it? Is that what you're saying? No, it's just, yeah. So again, I really do hope that they make sure they do speak to the people who are working on the front line and have that conversation. Alexis, we've got a couple of minutes left. I'm just going to ask you to sort of summarise your thoughts on the CPA, if I may, please. And you're on mute.
Clearly, my thoughts on this reflect a lot of what's been said across the piece by a number of people. We need to promote better public understanding, as you yourself said, Lucy, and that can take lots of forms, and the CPA should take a very active role in doing that. We need to stop it being a taboo subject and talk about it in the way it needs to be talked about, which is with absolute honesty and clarity about the appalling nature of the criminality that we have learned so much about. And for some of that, there is a necessity for, as has already been said, for reliable and accurate data so that we can also get rid of some of the myths about the nature of some aspects of child sexual abuse. So I think that's all I want to say.
Thank you very much. I think the news recently only further highlights that around the myths and fake shock at where this is as well. Thank you. John, then I'll come to you, David. John, do you want to briefly say a couple of sentences?
Yep. So I reflect everything everybody said. For me, the most important thing Cheryl said was a CPA that has the ability and capacity and everything that's implicit in that to think ahead of the curve about threats that are just over the horizon rather than just reacting to threats that are already here. You know, and I always quote the internet on this. Who knows what the internet's going to look like in 5 years' time? But with AI and everything else, I suspect that's going to be a growing area of threats. So one of the ways you can help stop this much more effectively is to start thinking about future threats rather than just dealing with current threats. And I really, really hope that that's what it's able to do.
Thank you. Thanks, John. David?
Yeah, so I just emphasize the need for the CPA to be seen by everyone as firstly existing, and secondly having teeth, having the power to make sure that organisations looking after children adhere to its recommendations, its guidance, and when they don't, that it can do something about it, that it can have them prosecuted or ensure that individuals are no longer able to look after children.
Brilliant, thank you. And Faye?
Thanks, Lucy. For me, the really crucial element of the CPA will be the focus on child sexual abuse. And so often child sexual abuse is missing from care plans, it's missing in statistics, it's missing in the data. It's absolutely crucial that we get that focus. And, you know, there is understandable anger in some of the comments around accountability. And for me, the CPA it's not going to answer all of that all at once, but it's a step along the way, and it's the way that we manage to get accountability. And for me, that's absolutely got to be one of the crucial elements of a CPA.
Brilliant, thank you. We have had so many comments, and as I said, many of them around some of the other recommendations on IICSA. And you know, a reminder as well that while we here at the TST we're campaigning and advocating for our members and as many survivors, we're you know, we're just communicating what we're hearing. We're not responsible for some of these things, but we will certainly try and encourage those communication methods as much as we can. We'll definitely hold another webinar on mandatory reporting really soon, because I know that's a really big issue, especially as that is going through. And Cheryl and Alia have kindly said that that they will respond from the DFE's point of view to all these questions in writing as well. Actually, you didn't say all these questions. I've just said that for you. But there we go. Thanks very much for offering to do that instead of our mandatory reporting. So we will get these questions down, and we will write responses to them and get them out. Literally 30 seconds. Cheryl, Alia, do you want to say something? Thank you so much.
I just wanted to thank you for holding this, and I know, you know, for all of those who've come on the call, that's a lot of your time, and it shows the commitment you have to this. And just to reflect back, we might not have it right now, but we are doing all we can to make sure it will make the difference that you all want and that we want.
Thank you. Alia, is there anything you wanted to add as well?
Yeah, just to reiterate that, thank you for your time, and we're always happy to answer any questions, be it here or offline as a team. So please do reach out if so.
Brilliant, thank you. And then from us here at TST, thank you so much for your time. Please do fill in that consultation. If you don't understand it, if you don't want to answer all those questions, that's okay. Keep an eye out for us today and tomorrow, where we will be publishing our document to help you decipher some of the longer questions, but you don't need to answer it all. The most important thing is that you do fill it in and stay informed of this, because this is our opportunity to make the change needed. Thank you, everyone. Thank you for joining us, and we'll see you all again soon. Thanks. Bye.